I dug through hours and hours of YouTube videos. I read a bunch of blog posts to get ready for this. I think it's high time we do a compare and contrast between 4 AI tools that are out in the market and all saying they're the best ever. So Replit, Cursor, Pythagora, and Bolt. I want to get through these in 5 minutes or less. So Replit is absolutely suitable for hobbyists. Like if you are just getting started, if you want to code your very first app, Replit is a great choice because you literally start from the homepage and in 5 seconds you're into coding. And it's frankly the easiest way to get in that I've seen. It's going to have limitations. It's not going to be suitable for more complex work. I certainly had issues when I tried to pull in Google authentication into a Replit app that I was messing around with. And it's going to often spiral when it comes to bug fixing. I've really had issues with Replit where you start with a simple app and it says it's going to work, and then it runs into an issue and it's unable to debug itself even when you feed it a lot of error messaging. So if you want to build something simple, if you want to just get started with code, it's super helpful. The education flavor that Replit brings is super useful, but it's not going to be suitable like if you need to build a production ready app. But as I was saying, there's 4 of these, so we'll get to other ones that might be more suitable for that. Cursor is the next one I want to talk about. It's a tool for developers first. It assumes you have done development before implicitly. It's going to run in a development environment on your laptop. It's going to assume that you're interested sometimes in coding manually and also in chatting and using an LLM to continue to code. Cursor is helpful because you can actually pick the LLM that you want to do the coding for you. And as we know, like we have different flavors with LLMs. Different LLMs are stronger at coding. A lot of people really like Sonnet 3.5 for that. Cursor lets you use Sonnet. Deployment is something that Cursor is going to let you handle yourself. So if you're new to development, Cursor may not be the thing for you because you may look at the idea of deploying and say, what's going on? How do I get other people to see this? And if that's kind of where you're at, you can get there with Cursor, but you have to actually walk through it step by step. It's not a one-click deploy by any means. So it's more suited for technical users. It has really solid support for JavaScript, for the React and Node.js frameworks. And I know a lot of folks who are traditional developers and want to move to LLMs who are swearing by Cursor right now. In fact, if you look at the #1 app in terms of new growth per a report that came out from Ramp, it's Cursor. So Ramp is a tool that like you use for corporate spend. So they actually have a peak in aggregate at where people are spending on tools. Cursor spiked up this month. And I think that's because it's so useful to development teams and not just to individuals. You might also be wondering, what if you're someone who's not necessarily a developer, but you do want to build something that is more production ready than what Replit would deliver? That's where Pythagora comes in. So Pythagora is really designed for the use case where you may not be a developer yourself, but you're working in a company that needs a business application of some sort. In that situation, you need something that is debugged, that is reliable. You need a reasonably effective deployment experience, so it's not too complicated, and it needs to actually work. Pythagora is really designed for that. So some of their experiences are like, hey, use Pythagora for building an accounts receivables app. That doesn't sound super glamorous. It's not something that the solopreneurs are going to necessarily build on. But it is really important if you are running a $10 million trucking business and you need to get your account receivables in order and you are running them off spreadsheets and you just want to build an app. That is the kind of thing that Pythagora seems to be designed for. And so it doesn't necessarily assume that you are going to know a ton about coding. It simplifies a lot of the deployment. It goes really, really hard on automated bug testing and fixing. And it's a really interesting take because it essentially, like each of these imply different personas. Like Replit is implying a hobbyist persona or targeting a hobbyist persona. Cursor is going after a developer persona. Pythagoras seems to be going after someone who is perhaps non-technical or technical adjacent, but who has a business use case. And I think that's a really interesting one because I think we're going to see a lot more of that. Finally, Bolt. Bolt is a really interesting one because it sort of hybridizes a few of these personas and adds a few new ones that I didn't expect. Sort of like Replit, Bolt does browser-based full-stack development, so you're in the browser the whole time. You can start typing right on the homepage to get into building things. It's designed to have a little bit more flexibility on language than Replit has. Deployment is also simple like Replit, and it has some really interesting sort of small-scale project, solopreneur-flavored work that I think I'm curious to see how they expand on. So, for example, Bolt is the only one that I found that suggests that you use their tool to build a slide deck. That was a little surprising to me. That's not the first thing I think of. They also include, build yourself a really pretty website, do it really fast. And so to me, this feels almost like Bolt is aiming at a technical adjacent freelancer, like a photographer that has maybe played around with HTML a little bit. And is running their photography business and wants to code up a website, wants to make sure they have a calendar drop down. That's the kind of thing where I think Bolt would really excel. So as you can see, like if you go through all four of these are not the same application, even though they use a lot of the same underlying technology and have very similar user experiences. And I think one of the things that we need to do more of is compare and contrast these and talk really honestly about which ones work well, which ones don't for particular use cases. I don't see this being a world that's a one-size-fits-all right now, and I think it's important to separate these out and actually understand what each does and what each targets. And so, for example, if I was building a small, full-scale app right now, and I had not had previous coding experience, I would probably start with Bolt. It's a bit of a gamble, but I think Bolt offers an easier way in the door than Pythagora. I think Pythagora is sort of a close second because it enables that, like that automated testing and the bug fixing is something that's going to be really helpful if you're just getting started. But Bolt seems to offer a little more flexibility. It's a bit of a judgment call right now. There's not a clear winner in that space of like, I'm just getting started and I want to build a full-scale app. I'd be curious for your take on it. Now, if I'm a developer, I do think Cursor wins hands down among those four. I think it's just not close because you can get into the code in a way that's very familiar with developers. And I don't think any of the other four really offer that in a way that's helpful, in a way that has the power of a localized development environment. So what's your take? If you're a developer, would you agree Cursor is the right call? And if you are a non-developer, which would you use for a small-scale app development?